You probably watched creators like Kwong, Dalen, and Noske and wondered, why does their content look so clean and cinematic? Well, the truth is it's not their camera or it's not their LUT, it's actually way deeper than that. And once you understand it, your content will not just look more aesthetic, but it will feel more aesthetic. I'm John, I'm a creative director, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to teach you how to build and find your own aesthetic. So first we need to know the definition of aesthetic. What exactly does aesthetic even mean? I've written here that aesthetic is a group of a specific style, whether it comes down to the colors that are used, whether the content looks moody and sad versus sunny and happy. When there's a consistent look being used over and over, that's an aesthetic. Why is it important to have an aesthetic brand? Well, I'll tell you right now, the reason why you want to have an aesthetic brand is because it brings identity along with your brand as well as you. If you're trying to use content to build your business, get sales, you're going to want to build an identity with your brand. You want people, when they watch your content and then when they see your brand, to actually feel something. For the entrepreneur space, you have aesthetics like the Miami aesthetic, or the entrepreneur aesthetic, or the dark aesthetic, or the Polaroid/disposable camera aesthetic. These are different aesthetics that you'll see across different brands. For example, Dalen uses the disposable camera aesthetic. If you go onto his Instagram, you're going to see tons of images of him using his disposable camera. Another example is Noske. Noske has an aesthetic that's more cinematic. Or Kwong, who's a young entrepreneur that travels the world, his content has a soft, muted color look. If you want to find an aesthetic that fits your brand, just simply ask yourself, what aesthetic do you identify with? Look at the type of content that you watch. Is it raw and off the dome, looks like it was just recorded off an iPhone? Or is it cinematic, with drone shots and different LUTs? Which aesthetic do you identify with? And if you don't know, don't worry, I'm going to be showing you exactly how to find your aesthetic in this next step. Alright, so the next step is Pinterest is your friend. So I use Pinterest to come up with different aesthetics for my clients. And whenever I'm coming up with the brand identity for my clients, I use Pinterest to come up with what the colors will be, how should they record, things like that. So I'll be going over exactly how you're going to use Pinterest to come up with your own aesthetic. So first you're going to hop over to Pinterest and create an account. And from there, you're going to be hit with a plethora of different images. Now what you're going to do is you're going to look up some aesthetics that you like. So for example, the Miami aesthetic, entrepreneur aesthetic, dark aesthetic, motivational aesthetic, things like that. You can also look up different people, so maybe some celebrities, different entrepreneurs, things like that. Treat Pinterest like Google. Look up anything. You can also find different colors, fonts, textures, graphics, pretty much anything. What you're going to do is you're going to select those images that match with your brand's identity or whichever ones that you like, and you're going to create a board. A board is basically just a ton of images that you've selected and saved in one place. Do this for like 30 minutes. It doesn't take very long. And once you're done, take note of the colors, the angles, the objects, the lighting, etc. This is what you're going to use for your brand identity. So if you're making content, take note of the colors. Are your colors muted or are they more vibrant? Look at the frames. Are they up close? Are they cinematic? Are they far away? Even take note of the actions that are in the images. Are they flexing their cars? Are they running? Are they working out? Take note of everything. You don't have to literally write it down. Just take a mental note or share it with your creative director if you have one. Now, most entrepreneurs are going to probably look at this and say, oh, I don't need to do this. I already have a good idea of what I'm trying to target and my brand identity. But using Pinterest is really going to help you in this next section, especially when it comes to how you want your content to look. Now, quick little plug here. I am a creative director, so this is what I basically do all the time. I do this for founders, coaches, basically anybody that's trying to make content. And so if you want me to personally help you out for completely free, by the way, just DM me Pinterest on Instagram, which is in the description, and I'll help you out. All right, step number 3, camera and LUTs. Now, the question that everybody asks is, does the camera you use actually matter? And my answer to that is, it depends. I would say that a better camera simplifies the process and makes certain aesthetics easier to achieve. So for example, let's say that you want to make really cinematic content. You can try and use your iPhone, but using a camera is going to help you achieve that aesthetic 10 times easier. Now let's actually get into the camera and what you should use. So first, there's a 10-bit/8-bit camera versus an iPhone. If your content is more raw, it doesn't need, cinematic editing and things like that, or you just don't have the time to record every single day, I suggest using your iPhone. But if you want your content to look a little bit more polished, a little bit more mature, more cinematic, I highly recommend using a camera. It's an investment that's going to go a long way if you learn how to use it right. Now, the difference between 10-bit versus 8-bit in a camera is this. 10-bit, there's a wider range of colors. As for 8-bit, there's a less amount of range for colors. Either or works perfectly fine. The camera that I'm recording on right now and that I always use is an 8-bit camera, but later down the road, I will be getting a 10-bit camera so I can make my content look a little bit more cinematic. It's also much easier to use a 10-bit camera in the color grading process, so just keep that in mind. All right, the next part of the camera, log versus Rec. 709. So if you don't know what log content is basically just a muted color profile that allows you to make more specific edits in the color grading process. So right now, if I turn off my color grade, you can see that I'm recording in a log profile, specifically S-Log2. Now, if you have an 8-bit camera, shoot an S-Log2 because an 8-bit camera, like I said, doesn't have a wider range of colors. If you have a 10-bit camera, shoot an S-Log3 because you'll have a wider dynamic range of color. That's pretty much just the basics. If you want to know more, there's tons of YouTube videos, so just go find one. So the other one that I was talking about was Rec. 709. Rec. 709 is basically what your camera on your phone records. Cameras can also record in Rec. 709, but in my opinion, I would just use the most of your camera and just shoot in a log profile. But if you don't want to go through all the color grading process, Rec. 709 is a perfect choice. You can still make edits to it, you can still color grade it and tweak it a little bit, but if you want the best range and more cinematic content, you want to shoot in S-Log2. The next part is exposure. Now, your exposure will depend on your aesthetic. So for example, if the bulk of your images in your Pinterest are in the daytime or there's just a lot of light, anything that's just not dark, then you'll probably need to up the exposure. Now, if your aesthetic is darker or you have a more contrasty type of vibe, lower your exposure. I'll probably have on screen two different examples of what it looks like to have high exposure and low exposure. So just depending on what your Pinterest looks like, you can choose which one that you like. The next part of mastering the camera is white balance. Now, I used to overlook this and just set the white balance to auto on my camera, but honestly, it just goes a long way in terms of recording, making sure your content looks polished, and overall just saving you a massive headache in the editing process. Because if you don't set your white balance correctly, what's gonna happen is you might see your content changing from blue to orange. Now, if for whatever reason you want that, be my guest, but for me it looks really unprofessional, so I always set my white balance to something, usually whatever is the closest to perfect white. In fact, right here, this is my gray card. A gray card is used to set the levels. You don't really need to worry about that, but what you do need to worry about is the white part. This is perfect white every single time, and so whenever I'm making my content, I always use that to set the white balance so that all of my colors look like the actual colors they are. Now, obviously I can tweak it later in the editing process, but my rule of thumb is if you can make it perfect in the recording process, it'll save you time, it'll save you a headache, and it will just look better in the editing process. The more you fiddle with the video, the worse that the quality is going to be, so try not to do too much. Now, lastly is composition, and this goes for all cameras, by the way. Now, composition alone can be its own separate video, so here's just what you need to understand. Number one, if you have that Pinterest board like I told you to make, you'll see the different type of angles that your aesthetic would mainly use. Number two, go watch some movies. Seriously, movies are a great way to learn composition and learn framing and how to make your content look cinematic. And even if you're not trying to make your content look cinematic, still understanding framing from a movie's perspective will help your content look more professional, which if you're trying to sell B2C or B2B, you want your content to look professional. Another part of composition is focal length. Now, this again is its own separate video, but again, I'll just explain it really quick. Basically, it's how distorted your lens look. So the easiest way I can show this is by taking your phone and recording a video in 0.5 and then recording a video in like the default, like number 1. You can easily see how the image is distorted on the 0.5 versus the regular default settings. Now, depending on how far away your camera is, what type of shot you're trying to get, you're going to want to set your focal length to a certain millimeter. Like right now, I can assume that my lens is on like 35. It's zoomed in a little bit because I don't want the whole background and I don't want any distortion while making this video. But if I had the camera right next to me, then I'd probably want it around 15 to 18, trying to get a wide angle so I can show more of my face and then also the background. Again, watch movies, watch different films, even watch YouTube videos, because it's going to help you understand framing and cameras and things like that. Now, the last part of this section is LUTs, or color grades. LUT stands for lookup table, but you don't really need to worry about that. Basically, you just need to know that's how creatives make their content look so cinematic or creative and artistic. I'll tell you right now from personal experience, you can't just make adjustments and call it a LUT. It just doesn't work that way. There are tons of different LUTs online, both free and paid. The paid ones for me always turn out better, more high quality, but I've had some free ones that are pretty decent. But the right LUT will make getting the aesthetic that you want much easier. And there are many different aesthetics, so there are many different LUTs. For example, Kwong, his colors are soft. They're not harsh in your face. They're not screaming at you. And that's partially why his content looks so aesthetic, cinematic, and mature. Dalen uses a more contrasty, orange-looking vibe, especially when he's working at night. You can definitely see the contrast between light and darkness. Now, this could be partially because he just turns up and cranks the contrast slider in Premiere Pro, or he has a specific LUT that does it for him. Tom, on the other hand, has a green and muted look. The shadows in his videos are tinted towards green, which is why his content looks like he's in the forest sometimes, but it's what makes Tom Noske. In fact, one of his main colors in his brands is green, so that's why he did that. And just like Finn, his colors are muted, which makes his content look more cinematic and mature. And now for the last section, practice. I mean, you most likely, unless you're like a film student, won't get this on the first try. It takes tons and tons of practice, but once you start understanding it and getting the hang of it, it's going to be second nature. I can confidently say I can make cinematic content whenever I want, wherever I am, because I've understood framing, I've understood focal length, I know what my brand identity is, and all of that just makes my content look really cinematic. And a creative director is usually the one that does all of this. Helps you come up with the LUT, helps you oversee the whole content process basically, and they better be making you a brand identity. But if you don't have one, you can just reach out to me, just DM Odyssey on Instagram, and I can help you out. But otherwise, that's exactly how you make aesthetic content. Let me know what you guys want to see next in the comments. Peace.